starting. Let's see. Oh, that's even better. All right. So let's see if we see people popping in. Yay, I love it. And we see people dropping in. Ding, 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 ding. All right, so we'll just give everybody a moment to jump on now that we opened the floodgates. And otherwise, how are you doing tonight, Dwayne, on this sweaty summer evening in New
Oh,
South Wales?
yes, today was a fun day where I had to go look at my future kids' school, right? So that was
Ooh.
parenting. Had to do that
Oh,
today.
and is there choices, or you've decided on it, you're just doing a tour?
It's not my local school, it's just
Oh,
next to it. And so
okay.
therefore it's all that drama that goes with,
Oh
can we
my
come to your
goodness.
school? Is my child good enough? All of that drama that goes with it.
Well, hopefully you passed the sniff test.
It's open day, so we'll see how we go. Snip test is later. We like what
Oh,
we're
I see.
sniffing.
Yeah. All right. So, and you know what the wonderful thing about this webinar is, webinars are hard to dedicate time, so amazing that all the people that are joining us this evening have actually put aside that hour of time for themselves. But the beautiful thing is it's being recorded. So if at any time anyone has to jump off, or a kid is screaming, or you're just too tired, you can't keep your eyes open anymore, then everybody will get the recording tomorrow. And I think it's the perfect thing to listen to while you're walking your dog, or you're walking yourself, or you're just doing something like going for a good walk. Then you can listen and multitask at the same time. So
It's true. I have a face for radio, is what you just said.
no, you don't. You've got actually. I'm putting myself in the same bucket, right?
We got face for radios. Let's go.
All right. So look, I'll get started. Just bearing in mind that it is late. And today is a really exciting webinar. So let me first start by my welcome to country. I was just saying to Dwayne that I always have a mini panic about forgetting it. So I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the Gadigal lands on which I'm meeting today. And I'd like to pay my respects to elders past and present. And Dwayne has a different land that he's residing on, so I'll leave that one up to you.
So I'm currently on the Tunganal clan and on the Darug Nation, with the borders of Winson Hills, which is by the river. But the little painting behind me is of the Blue Mountains, and it is of Secret Women's Business. So I'm allowed to own the painting. I'm just not allowed to know what the Secret Women's Business is as well.
Yeah, I
So
was going to ask you about that. All right. So, without further ado, my name is Bianca. I'm one of the directors at Plan Hero. Plan Hero is in its fifth year this year. It started as a small independent plan manager, and it is still an independent plan manager that's just getting more well known and more robust. And one thing that has remained the same when we had one staff member to 20 staff members is that everybody at Plan Hero is deeply knowledgeable, is has specialist knowledge. We call our plan managers specialist plan managers, because every single one of the people that answer the phone and talk to you is a plan manager that has deep knowledge about the NDIS. And that's something that's really important to us. So tonight, my role is to bring the technical aspect into the webinar. And I have the head of our finance team, Jacqueline, who is going to be my real specialist around funding. So there isn't anything that Jackie doesn't know about claiming and what we can and can't claim, or what we have and haven't seen in the NDIS. And we have the Q&A open for the evening and the chat open. And at the end, we'll go through questions specifically. But as we go through the evening, if you have a specific question about something, Jackie will be answering those questions in the Q&A. So more important than myself, and I'm actually super excited about this particular webinar because I've done a number of these, and I'm always excited to share knowledge to make things easier. But tonight I've got a special guest. I might be one of the NDIS experts at Plan Hero, but I've got a participant expert or an expert participant, and that is Dwayne Fernandes. So I'm not going to say anything more about Dwayne. He's going to introduce himself and he's going to tell you why I have asked him on as my expert participant.
Hi, everybody. I'm Dwayne Fernandes. I am the expert participant, but in addition to that, I'm someone that joined, I think, the NDIS, has utilized the NDIS 5 years after it came out, and I'm self-managed, but I'm also have a daughter who is plan managed. You can guess by who. Um,
Mm.
and uh, and there's a lot of learning on the process that I've gone through in becoming an NDIS participant and what that meant from going across from the old system as someone with a physical disability. I'm missing a few fingers and I'm missing a couple of legs. So you can show those later. This it's probably in some brochures somewhere with that. But that journey has been something, and so we'll get into that.
Okay, so what we're going to cover this evening, there's six things. We're going to look at how the NDIS actually works, how to read your NDIS plan. So we're going to look at a few plans. We're going to talk about the different parts of a plan. We'll look at the different types of plan management. I'm not assuming that everybody here is plan managed like Dwayne is. You might be self-managed like Dwayne is, or you might be agency managed. So we'll look at that as well. Then we'll look at spending rules, which is really important these days in the NDIS. Lots of risk, lots of confusion around that. And then with spending comes how to make sure you don't underspend and you don't overspend. And finally, that whole part of, okay, when you don't know what you should be doing, where can you look for help? Now, I'm doing this webinar a little bit different to some of our other webinars in that I'm not doing a whole lot of slides. I have slides for the plans because you got to look at those. But apart from that, the purpose of this evening is for me to tell you how it should work, and then for Dwayne to tell us how it actually works and to give us his insights
Oh
and the
boy.
things that have helped him on his journey. So we'll try and keep it PG, Dwayne. All right. So the
Not
real
promising
basic,
anything.
the real basic is how does the NDIS actually work? So you've gone through that application, you've got approval, you've gone to a plan meeting or two, you've met with a planner. Finally, you get your NDIS plan. And I think with those kinds of things, often you're completely exhausted by the time you actually got that plan. So now what do? We've got funding that is in a plan for a period of time. That funding is broken up into pieces that can be spent over periods during that plan. So we're going to look at how do we actually take that toolkit of funding and then make decisions about how to spend it, what to spend it on, and how to reach those goals that form the backbone of our plan. So, starting again at the top, Dwayne, you have now been through, I don't know how many of your own plans or your daughter's plan, but you're past first plan.
Yes.
So what happened? Walk me through what happened when you got that first plan. How did you feel when you looked at that attachment in your email or the letter in your post? How did you feel when you took it out and you read it?
Okay, so I'll take you back to the date on this first plan is 12th of April 2019. That is the very first plan that I ever received. And and I'm someone that had initially avoided going down the pathway of the NDIS because legs I used to be able to get from my local process. So initially I have a lot of resistance immediately going into this thing. I go through the process, and you're right. It is the I've done this bit, and I've done that bit, and I've done to this hoop, and here comes this letter, and it is for $11,000, $11,131.83, and I'm like, I can't buy a left foot with that.
I was just about to say, your prosthetics, you put maybe a couple of zeros on that for two legs.
Correct. And so you're like, what is this plan? What exactly am I supposed to do with $11,000? And then you get to the like realization that the first plan you get is effectively your starter plan. It is the plan that you go get in a whole bunch of information supporting exactly what you need so that the next plan actually has the funding you need. So all that run up and activity that you did to say that you belong in the system, it was to identify that you belong in the system and then actually go get some experts to tell you exactly what you should use with this money. And that's the frustrating part about this, right? You think you finally crossed that hurdle, but then it's you have to submit another set of revisions and say, these are the reports, these are what these experts are saying that I need so that I can utilize this funding. And then from that first plan, the very next plan was it ended in a couple of months, and then I had to get another plan that started off in December that year. And that plan had a little bit more money in it because they actually identified parts of it that linked to my goals. They assessed my goals, they assessed the outcomes, and they identified that I need legs, and they went from there. And so it started to change and it started to grow. And that becomes kind of the very first plan, and it's a shock. So I hope that gives you a little bit of indication about
Yeah.
the very first plan.
And what I took from that, Dwayne, is that as annoying and frustrating as it might be when you get that plan, and we hear about that all the time at Plan Hero. Somebody gets a plan and they say to us, this is not what the planner told me was going in my plan. What do I do? I remember one lady whose daughter had two wheelchairs funded in her plan, one regular one and one sports.
Yeah.
And she was like, what am I going to do with two wheelchairs? But the service she needed wasn't in the plan. So, those of you who have had a plan for some time, I'm sure there's some of you that have had that experience. And those of you who just got that first plan and are looking at it thinking, is this what we talked about? So, I guess the takeaway is don't stress, although it's hard not to. The only problem today is that there are delays in making those changes. You know, you get that plan, it's not quite right. How long is it going to take the NDIS to make that change? Your plan doesn't stop while you're requesting that review. So that's the good thing. But if
Correct.
it is significantly different, then you do need to go back and go, hang on, guys, this isn't what we agreed on. And also another important point, and we do this all the time at Plan Hero, you can ask for the planner's notes. You are allowed to ask for any information that was created about you. It is a privacy right in Australia. And often when you see those planners' notes, it's evident that what the planner was supposed to do and what somehow has come out the other end don't quite match. And that's often easier to sort out. So if you looked at that plan, what you would see, and we're going to look at some plans in a moment, is that the overall NDIS funding is now separated into 4 lanes, so to speak. We've got core, capacity building, capital, and recurring. Now, I'm not going to go into a whole lot of detail tonight because you're never going to remember what I'm talking
Sure.
about. When we finish this webinar, we will send everybody a recording as well as links to very explicit, easy to understand resources that will talk in more detail about every part of what we're talking about today. So tonight, just let it roll over you and kind of get a broad understanding of it. So
I'll
yeah,
interject just in that space there.
go ahead.
Because here's the thing, right? So the thing that we don't realize, and this is the thing that's a shock, the government doesn't know you better than you know yourself. And a team of multi-agency people in government in different areas definitely do not know you as well as you hope that they would, which is why that first plan is shocking, right? And the thing is, I'm not here to put excuses for them either, but in the sense of it's understandable the kind of patience that we've had to have because we're hoping that they get us and they don't get us. And also the disability community is insanely diverse. Like I'm part of amputee associations, other bits and pieces, and you would think all the amputees might need something similar. And I can tell you each plan is very different between the different people and based on where they are and what they use. And so this is the part that you've got to get really focused in and saying exactly what you want and exactly what you need to to tackle the goals that you're trying to achieve. But I'll pause right there. I'm going to hand back to you as you go into these next sections of the plans and other bits and
No, but
pieces.
that's a really good point, Dwayne, because when you go into that plan meeting, one of the amazing resources we've got on Plan Hero is preparing for the plan meeting. You have to know what you want to ask for, so that you can be prepared. And sometimes people are surprised by the meeting. I've had people who have got a phone call from the NDIS and they're gone, okay, this is your plan meeting. We're doing it on the phone. And they're like, whoa, 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 hold on a sec. I'm not ready for it. So yeah, just a little bit of prep in that department is certainly going to help you when you start off that journey. So we've got these 4 buckets of funding, so to speak.
Right.
Core is probably, I was going to say the most popular one, but that sounds a bit odd. Core is probably one of the most common areas that people have funding in. And there's a really great way to kind of understand the difference between the core bucket and the capacity building bucket. Core is for today. It's to manage your needs, your disability related needs today, and to help you start reaching your goals. And I really like that comparison to capacity building, which is to help you build the skills and independence in the longer term. So core is for today, capacity building is for the future, so to speak. So in that core, and you will see this in the plan, we have 4 different categories of funding. And the thing that is interesting about core, and you'll see it written in your plan, it says flexible. Now, wherever you see the word flexible, we love the word flexible. That means you can interchange your spending. Plans have changed so much over the last, 4 years. Even today, we have different plans that people have. And I was looking at different sections of core to see how they changed in plans. And truly, there are plans there that are completely different. So at the end of the day, you just need to know what these top levels are and then look at your own plan and see what it says. But in core, the funding that you have there, you can use across these 4 categories of funding really easily.
Can I give you an example of some of that?
Yes, go ahead, please.
Okay, so as an amputee, and so this is that type of area. It's a case of when I got prepared for my first plan, I did all the pieces I need to get those running legs that I was looking to get. I'm a highly active amputee. However, by the time that first plan came into place, I was ready. I'd already done the things I was going to try to lose weight to get this big capital expense of these legs. And what happened was that $11,000 budget came in and I couldn't afford a single leg. So I had to put weight back on so I could maintain myself and my legs. So that's not a great outcome for like that first plan situation. So you can tell that I've gone through a little bit of trauma on this thing, but effectively the capacity building piece is the exercise physiologist that
Absolutely.
takes you through the growth process on your training, those type of skill sets, right? Those things that help you get there. But on the flip side, there is for myself cleaning of my house, the maintenance of these hedges and other bits and pieces as an amputee. Some of these things are hard to maintain, and so some of those stuff is within there as a core element of maintenance.
Daily,
and that's daily
disability related, right?
And
so what
those aren't going anywhere. They might increase or change based on how my life is going to be. And so core is something that'll always be utilized. And it's something that's the closest to the societal element too, usually.
And something that's important there is that we see a different amount of core depending on different needs. And often with young children, we'll see a very small amount of core unless there are circumstances where a lot of support is needed, because the NDIS seems to think that it's the role of a parent to care for a child. So they don't tend to be particularly generous with core funding for young children. Other examples might be, so Dwayne mentioned, things like yard maintenance, cleaning, gardening, a support worker. And then also there's a section in that core, a support worker that either is going to help you with your everyday needs, like your personal care, or a support worker that might help you access the community, get out, meet people, socialize. So everyday activities, core. Then capacity building. So this is actually, core and capacity building are probably the two that we almost see in every single plan, except for very young children. As I said, we won't see too much core. But capacity building, the number one category in that, and there's a lot of categories in that particular bucket, is therapy. 99.95% of NDIS participants have therapy in their plans. And that is why we have such a problem finding therapy providers, because of the demand. But in that capacity building area of your plan, remember, it's to build independence, to build skills, and to reach your long-term goal. We have 10 categories of services. And we'll look at some of those, things like support coordination, things like increased social and community participation. So that's the cost of the actual program that might be funded in your plan. Plan management, choice and control, that is also funded in this capacity building bucket of funding. Finding and keeping a job. So these are examples of the type of funding you might see in capacity building. What is different about capacity building is that it is not flexible. So if in your plan it says finding and keeping a job, you got $20,000 over 12 months, you cannot take that $20,000 and go and use it on exercise physiology, because that's actually, you need that more. It's not flexible within those categories. We're still waiting for that day when we're able to move between categories. I'm not sure whether we'll actually get there or not. What other examples of capacity building supports have you seen come across your own plans, or participants that you've worked with as well?
Yes. So within that thing, for me, it was the improve OT and the physiology, which is what I'm looking at on my plan, and basically building those areas of strength and capacity to do what I do. And these things are there to link into those long-term goals, and that's very useful. But from a core perspective, it is that's the thing that I will have forever. My part of the plan will be legs and elements of core to maintain myself. So the problem for me is that capital is something that
That's
has
the
to be
next one.
close, right? And
yes,
so that's
right.
the part that
That's number 3. So we've got
I'll let you get into that.
Yeah, core, capacity building, and we're ready to move on to capital. So what's your capital example?
Well, capital example number 1 is...
I knew you were going to do that.
And 2,
at
and
least
then,
you got pants on.
Right. Yeah, I haven't worn. No, I haven't worn long pants. I only have short pants always. Right. So for the last 5 years, I don't think I've worn any type of thing longer than my knees. But that being said, what I needed. So what I needed for me, and this is the thing that's a little bit interesting and hard to justify, is that I actually initially needed a wheelchair because I've lost the ability to walk, because I lost so much weight, and therefore it caused rubbing in the legs to then get my legs. Then by the time I could get my legs, I actually have 3 sets of legs. Why does Dwayne need 3 sets of legs? And that's based around Dwayne's plans and goals, right? I have the everyday legs, which is at a certain height. I have the running legs, which is about good exercise.
You mean like, is it Blade Runner or one of those? Like, have you got like the...
Yeah, I've got the Blade Runner running
the
legs.
proper ones?
Correct. Yeah.
Oh, we're going to have to get a video of that, Dwayne.
I
want to see you doing the 100-meter.
I've done the 100-meter backwards in Germany. Like but there's also then the beach legs. Why? Because the family are beach people. And so I have these legs that actually have no feet. There's no sand associated. It's literally just a stump. And what that is that is custom. But that is the stuff that I need to get so that I can live the life that I'm living in the way that I'm living it. Right? Do those legs get changed often? There's money in the plan. Basically, there's always money in the plan for a capacity for those legs to be built, and to be built urgently. So therefore, most of my plan always looks like it's underutilized by like 70%, because there's always like a high capital cost. And so that becomes a thing that I have in there as the funds needed for those legs. And those are stated funds for specifically legs. Right?
Oh, I love that word, stated. We're going to look at that when we look at the plan. So we said flexible. So flexible, amazing, can move it around. Stated, absolutely not. Dwayne's legs are stated. He cannot use the money for the legs on anything else. Only those very
outcomes.
fancy leg outcomes. Yeah. So we've got core capacity building. And interestingly, on the capacity building, I talked about therapy, and Dwayne mentioned it briefly. It's improved daily living. So just in case you're thinking, I didn't see therapy in my capacity building or in my plan, it's improved daily living. So the fourth one is a real non-starter. It's called recurring, and it's where the NDIS is paying money for usually transport into your bank account every couple of weeks. A small percentage of people have that funding. It's not an everyday expense that everybody would warrant.
Yep, I used
So
to have that in the state government, and then I think when this rolled over, I lost that. But yeah, those are the type of things.
So we've got this plan, we've got these buckets of funding. Inside each bucket, it has categories that I can spend on. And we'll talk a little bit about how to sort of translate that category into an actual thing that you can spend your money on. But also what we'll see in these plans is that it says how the funds are managed. So it might say in your plan, core, flexible, plan managed, or core, flexible, self-managed. And it is possible to have a plan that has a combination of self-managed, plan managed, and agency managed. I've seen all three in a plan. So next to each type of support that you have in your plan, it will say how that support is managed. So we have three options: plan managed, self-managed, and agency managed. So if you are plan managed, you would need a plan manager, a specialist plan manager like Plan Hero, who will look after all of the administrative tasks of your purchases, of your services. Your plan manager pays your bills. Your plan manager looks at your budget. So hold on. A good plan manager looks at your budgets, lets you
Well
know.
stated.
Thank you. I don't want to make any false promises because I know there's a lot of plan managers that don't do this. They will let you know when you're underspending. They will let you know when you're overspending. They will answer your questions that you have about, can I use my funding on this before you spend it? So it's if you have a good plan manager, it is amazing support to help you in the NDIS. And you would have asked for that, or they would have offered that at your planning meeting. Self-managing is when you are an NDIS cowboy like Dwayne, and you
I
manage all of that yourself. You pay your bills, you keep your records, you check your funding, you make those big decisions,
You
and
cry
you do
at
all of
night,
that.
and then you try
Yeah.
again. And
Why?
so which is where exactly the viewpoint on this thing is. Okay, so because I did it for me as self-managed, I I had to, unfortunately, because I had to learn to fight for what I needed to have in my plan. I learned so much about that entire process that I actually was able to start a company within within the organization, which is why Minds at Play comes to existence. And
Mm,
we'll maybe talk about that later. But
mm,
effectively, I knew the detail well enough to know that you could. This is where certain things existed. But doing that work, as I can say, as self-managed, if you can manage the routine of it, and it is routine, and it's learning the process and everything else. It's maybe it's for you, maybe. And the sense that the structure around how I do it, and the ability to fight specifically on my behalf, is something that because I learned to that level of detail, I was happy
mm,
to keep doing it.
mm,
When it came to my daughter, I'm like, no, I got a plan manager. I'm sending them straight to Plan Hero, and and it's simpler that way, in the sense of, because you might be able to advocate for yourself, but also you must have the
mm,
spoons to manage to advocate for yourself, and the
mm.
ability to bang your head against the wall enough to keep going. Uh, but also having a good plan manager allows you to not have those problems, because they're actually engaging with the community at scale to know what's working and what's not working, and what that sits.
And Dwayne, you also have a commercial brain. You started a business, you're running a business, you're working in government roles. So that sort of management could easily fall within the skills that you already have. But if you don't have those skills already, or you don't have
Sure.
the time, if you
Yeah.
have lots of kids and you work full time and you're doing a big support role, you need someone that you can depend on to actually look after that for you. So if it is your first plan, I would say being plan managed initially would be a wonderful idea. And then you can decide. You can always change. So if you are
Correct.
self managing today and you're thinking, it is just too much. I had a mum come to me this week that I know very well. She has a very big job. And she just said to me, I just can't do it anymore. And I can't keep up to date. So I'm always worried that I'm claiming the wrong thing. I'm using the wrong category. I don't know what the change in the rules is. And, we do see these instances where people are claiming the wrong things who are self managed. They will
And it's
simply
and
change
it's
you.
they will, and it's not your fault. Let me be very clear
Not,
on that,
no,
right?
100%.
Let me be very clear how not your fault it is, in the sense that the legislation around the NDIS is larger than the tax code in Australia. And I'm an
Yes.
insolvency accountant to start up with, so I can tell you that it's easier doing tax than it is doing the NDIS.
NDIS. You're
And
right. You're
and
right.
with that in mind, you're not wrong. And so therefore, and also their expectation that second they do a single a briefing or a memo on their website with hardly any communication to anybody that you are now an expert on it, that you paid attention to every drop of the hat change, which has occurred almost every 6 months. I'm sorry, we're going down the wrong pathway,
Yeah, no, it
but
has. You're right.
it's
You're
every
right.
six
That's
months.
one of the things that we talk
It's
about
Bianca's
often.
problem. Yeah, it's
It
Bianca's problem to
it
worry about it,
is.
not
And,
yours.
and it is. It's our plan managers that every week we're going, okay, what's changed? What does everybody need to know? What do you have to tell your participants? What do you have to guide your participants? So keeping up to date with that as an individual is very difficult. So I would
Lots
say
of
with
gray
with
hair.
a good plan manager, it should de-stress. It should de-stress your NDIS life.
Yes.
So, and then agency managed, you often don't have any choice about it. No one would choose it because you can only use registered providers. You have very limited choice. The thing with agency managed is if you are self managing and you are making mistakes, we have seen people literally moved off self management into agency managed with an email saying, we don't believe you're spending your funds appropriately. You're now agency managed. And that's not your fault. The rule could have changed last week to this week, and you don't know that. So, obviously I'm a little bit biased, but I think that the support
No,
that we give
you have a good
families
understanding of
is
the mix
value.
and you're seeing
Yeah.
it scale. So you're not biased. You actually have the data.
All right. So now you've got that plan, you've got that funding, and now we're thinking, okay, how do we make decisions about what we can spend it on? Now, in October last year, I mean, this is just like NDIS style. Overnight, we now have lists called the NDIS support lists, and it will tell you what you can and can't spend your funding on. Now, this threw everybody upside down because the first version of the list didn't come with any instructions. So everyone was completely freaking out. If it's not on the list, I can't buy it. If it's on the no list, I can't keep it. What do I do? So luckily, as all things NDIS, we get more information. They explain it a little bit better. And now we do have these NDIS support lists, which are guidelines. They're not word for word specifically listed items. It's a guideline. It talks about the type of supports you are able to spend funding on and the type of supports you cannot. So we do have these two lists. Examples might be on the NDIS support lists of items that you can spend your money on. They might talk about everyday expenses like food preparation or support work or therapies. On the list where it says you cannot spend your funding on it, they're usually pretty obvious, I must be honest. Let me think of PG options. Cigarettes, vaping, groceries, rent. Now, the NDIS may not be spent, or NDIS funding may not be spent on these items. It was always there implicitly, but people were spending on those items. And obviously, that's something that the NDIS needed to get a handle on. Otherwise, we won't have any NDIS in 5 years' time. So now it's in black and white, and that is helpful for plan managers. Hard, but helpful, and hopefully helpful for self-managing people. But I mean, you're still going to have to go and look at the list. I mean, you must know that list backwards by now, Dwayne. But for
Oh
the
boy.
everyday person with a new plan, did you even know that there was an NDIS support list out there? I mean, it would seem unlikely because it's very, very tricky. So when you're deciding what you can spend your funding on, there's kind of four things you're going to do. The first thing you're going to do is look at your plan and see if your goals relate to that service or that support that you want to spend your funding on. The second is you're going to decide, is it reasonable and necessary? Now, reasonable and necessary has been in the NDIS since the start. I've been in the space nearly 9 years now. Next month will be 9 years. And that is probably one of the single things that was there at the beginning and it's still there. And that is actually 6 questions that you need to ask yourself about that support. Really briefly, they are, will it help me reach the goals of my plan? Is it good value or reasonably priced? That's actually quite an important one these days. Do I have funds in my plan for that item? Will it help me connect with the community and improve relationships? Bit of a weird question. Is it funded by the NDIS and not other government services? That's also important. Education department does education, health department does health, NDIS does disability, and there's quite a clear line as far as the NDIS is concerned. And is the support safe and beneficial? Then the third thing you would do is now you'd go to the support list and you would check to see whether the item.
I'm already lost, Jackie. I'm done.
This is the thing, Dwayne. This is how did I start the webinar? I said, we're going to look at the way it is supposed to work, and then we're going to look at the way that it does work. It does get a little bit easier. The fourth piece, which was also added last year, was, is it in my funding period? Do I have money in my funding period to buy that item?
Yes.
So I think the first few times you're looking at these decisions, it might be hard. If you have a plan manager, a good plan manager, I would suggest that you ask your plan manager, I want to buy this. Can I buy it? I am looking at the, what do they call it? Mellomat. I want to buy a Mellomat for my child. Can I buy it? Now, let's say 4 years ago, you probably could have bought the Mellomat. Now the NDIS will go, the cost of a Mellomat can be a comparative item, can be purchased that might have the same outcome for a lower price. Therefore, it's not reasonably priced. Therefore, we're not going to fund it. So it has got a much more tricky in the NDIS right now. But I guess if you had to make it really short, your decision making, look at reasonable and necessary because it's got, will it help me reach my goals? Run your eye over the support list and see if it is likely not to be allowed. And then finally, check your funding period in your plan to see if you have money for it. And I'm not going to dive down funding periods now. When I pull up those plans, I'm going to talk a bit more about funding periods. But Dwayne, when you're making purchasing decisions for yourself or for your daughter, like how are you running through that in your head? Or do you now have a handle on it like 5 years later or however long it's been?
Yes, 5 years is, if you're coming in new to this thing, you're like, why are these people speaking a completely different language to English? And like, if you think about the words you've just said in the last 4 minutes, the answer is none of that is sensible, logical outcome. That is you're speaking IT jargon code, right? But if you're learning it like bit by bit, it makes sense over time, which is exactly as you said, start up with a good plan manager that helps you understand the process. Because your year 3 plan and year 4 plan is almost identical. You've actually established your relationships that your people that you're working with and those type of areas. And so this is where that becomes sensible to have in those. I know who I'm utilizing for this service. I know what I'm utilizing for that service. And yes, those decisions around those things, being that I'm in my like 50 of these things, I know that this service is something that I'm constantly utilizing, and therefore I'm utilizing it in the way that's supposed to be funded for. I know that I'm always going to get legs. I kind of know who's that. Those people aren't changing for me. They're the same people who's always made my legs. They're just getting funding through the NDIS now, right? And those are the type of things that your disability is got cohorts of people that support you, and you'll find the ones who understand the language of the NDIS to provide that service in the way that suits you. And it's more likely you're dealing with people who need more services than infrastructure.
Mm,
Infrastructure and capital is one-off, but
mm.
and those things are usually supported by capacity building people such as OTs and so on that says this has to be built for this person because reasons that are linked to this area. So it is getting your relationships. And in the NDIS community, if you've just got your plan and you've got no community, it's really hard. And this is where part of this is picking up the phone and speaking to Plan Hero and finding other people like them, like the
Mm,
entire support community around them.
mm.
They're telling you what actually works for you and your community. Like you don't want to get hung up on a specific item. You want to get hung up on this type of item or this type of service is going to improve my, or it is part of maintaining my. And that's a good enough structure to kind of get you there. You're not saying I need an Apple iWatch or whatever like that. Don't get hung up on the very particular thing. It's like I need to improve this part of my life, and I think a device might help me get there, as opposed to, or it might be a service that gets me there, right? And so long as you understand where that is, these guys can help. And
So you're saying stop looking at the item, but take a step back and say, I need something that's going to help me
what's your goals?
get out. Yeah, exactly. So start there. That's really super advice, practical advice. Stop
Yeah,
worrying about the item or the support or the service that you're looking at. Start all the way back and go, I need
yeah,
something that's going to help me do this. But Dwayne, your plan is much simpler perhaps than say your daughter, because your daughter's going to be getting older. She's going to have different needs, she's going to have
right,
different plans, you're going to get different funding. You're going to be like everybody else here this evening, where you're going to be going, okay, now she's a teenager, now she's a young adult, now she wants to live on her own. And then you're going to be having to decide, okay, what services are we going to get? How's that plan changing
correct.
um, each
Yep,
period?
it's painful. She's turning 10 and we're assessing schools for her right now. And all those future decisions is exactly the same situation. Is that stuff that should be linked into the NDIS? What part of the NDIS actually helps with that schooling element? Or what part of that thing is the actual school? And
Mm.
this is the thing. But long as you have your goals and your plans, long as you don't get specifically hung up on exactly an item, you will have people to help you support and get you likely to where you think you're going. And that's the good stuff about communities like this.
And it gets easier, right? It does get easier.
I would love to say that officially.
Come on, Dwayne.
I don't know. So I'll say from an understanding the system and the
Yes. So
process,
you
it
get
gets
more
easier.
knowledgeable. So
Correct.
you get more knowledgeable.
You're able to learn the dance that is involved in this situation. And that's the important part. Can you go, no, do I need to take this? Do I need to take all this load on, or can I actually share the load? Do I need to utilize this way, or can my provider change the way they're working to actually comply? And those are the other things. Because believe it or not, all these changes that are occurring aren't just occurring to you. They're occurring to the plan managers, they're occurring to the providers, and they're occurring to the NDIA staff themselves. And so none of them, sometimes they're left with the that's communicated. I have to now figure out what that means for us before we get there. And that's the hard part about this, because it feels like there's a lot of noise, a lot more noise than there should be
Mm.
when it's a personal situation for me trying to fix my own get my things in order. There's a lot more noise, and that's the part that support structures help you get there.
And
That's
it's
what you
tricky
provide.
because we've got, we've got lives on top of the NDIS. And that's, I speak to many families, many parents, and often I'll start with, I just want to tell you that everybody finds this confusing. Everybody finds this overwhelming. It's not just you, because I think sometimes people just think like, I just don't know what I'm doing.
No,
It's just me,
many people
but
don't know
it
what they're
isn't.
doing.
And we've been here. I've been in the NDIS space for 9 years. Plan Hero has been operating for 5 years, and we still have to stop and go, what?
Yeah,
And the support list is the perfect example, Dwayne. Do you remember when they first came out? There was a line in the support list that said gaming therapy wasn't allowed, and everybody's like, gaming
what is
therapy?
gaming therapy? Can you
Okay, but they
define what
had,
gaming therapy is for me? And
uh,
even they could not do that for you.
and the problem is that when it came out, there was no explanation around it. So
Right.
um, a lot of the NDIS things kind of come out in one big hit, and then bits are added later. And that's the bit that you guys actually have to keep track of. And the only way to keep track of that is actually to follow people like Plan Hero, like our sister company, My Care Space, who are publishing those changes all the time. I mean, we have resources around, what is gaming therapy? Am I allowed gaming
Yeah.
therapy? Now, what they eventually did define is that using a game in therapy as a tool is not the same as gaming therapy. Using an animal during therapy as a tool to calm somebody down, to have some kind of effect, is not animal therapy.
Equine
So
therapy or things of the nature, right?
the
Yeah.
two, yeah. So they did make those clarifications over time. So the point I'm trying to make is, fortunately, you have to sign up to Plan Hero, sign up to My Care Space, sign up to any other website where you go and you read information. You think, okay, that's pretty helpful, and keep up to date like that.
Yep.
What do you think was the what do you think? Now, this is going to be a tricky one. What did you find the most challenging or the trickiest bit about having these support lists which controlled, what you could purchase or what you couldn't purchase? What did you find the most challenging about trying to work out what you could spend your funding on?
Um, the inconsistent messaging provided from the agency themselves.
Mm,
So the agency would say this, and you'd find the head location in that person in that area and say, "This is the specific wording you mean, correct?" Which means that if I'm doing this, we're okay, correct? And they go, "Yes." And then you'd hear about a regional plan manager and so on that says, "That's gaming therapy." I'm like, go speak to your boss. Like communicate internally
yeah,
first. Like,
that's tricky.
and so this is kind of like I'll explain a little bit more about Minds of Place is if that's it's an
Yeah,
appropriate process,
we'll
right?
definitely have time for that.
Correct.
Definitely. Um,
So yeah, so
yeah,
within the
so
space, it's about that, right? It's that in communication between systems that makes it hard.
Yeah, and I can identify with that certainly. Now, if you've got this funding, you're making these funding decisions. The last two things that we were looking at is, how do you make sure that you're spending appropriately, and what do you do when you're confused? So, what I want to do is bring up my plans and share them with you. Now, let me just find my presentation view. Ba boom. All right. So, Dwayne, you're my test dummy here. Can you see my plan on my
I can see
screen?
your plan. I can see that you
Okay.
don't have an NDS contact.
Okay. Fantastic. Yes, we took that out. All right. So, this is just, excerpts from plans, dummy plans, but just for illustration, this is really how a plan would look, or parts of your plan would look. So, your front page obviously has your details. That NDIS contact is actually quite important. Usually it has the name of the LAC, who is your contact at the NDIS. There's no planner that is your contact. They do not deal with participants. You should have a single point of contact, and hopefully you can get hold of them when you need them. This first part of looking at your funded supports is quite important. So we've got here the total amount of what you have in your whole plan. And beneath that total amount of 58,000-ish are the dates of the plan. So that's the start date and the end date of your plan. So this particular one is just 1 year. We've seen 2 years. Sometimes we've seen 5 years. Sometimes you just get a rollover of 2 years, but that is actually telling you what the length of your plan is. And then looking at the funding components in this particular plan, it's like a quick summary of the funding items that you have got inside your plan. Now, what's sort of a little bit confusing and interesting, or probably not interesting unless you're a plan manager, is that you can see I've got core flexible, second from the bottom, the second last option. But the other items are actually capacity building items. So it doesn't sort of split it in my plan, it just pops in the category of funding. And you'll see that next to the name of each type of funding, it has listed or named how it is managed. So finding and keeping a job is agency managed in this plan. Improve daily living skills, agency managed. That's your therapy. Same for increased social and community participation. Recurring transport, self-managed. Core, that is your support worker, plan managed. And then the funding part of it, choice and control, that's your plan manager's fees. And incidentally, the fees for a plan manager, people always wonder about this, are stated. They cannot be used for anything else. So if you are plan managed, they will put an amount in your plan that is only for plan management. If you don't choose a plan manager, you can't use it for anything else. In fact, you wouldn't be a good idea not to choose a plan manager, because you can't pay for anything without a plan manager if your plan is plan managed. But interestingly, that this particular plan has 3 different types of management in the same plan. Goodness, I've got a rogue mouse. In that first part, that core flexible, you can see that it is plan managed, which means that I can use registered and unregistered providers. That is what happens with plan management. So you've got good flexibility there. The only restriction you have with plan management is you cannot pay more than the NDIS rate. So hopefully you don't want to, but for things like psychology, which are hell of an expensive, you might have, $20 above the NDIS price. So you'd have to pay that $20 yourself and claim, I'm just going to make up a number. Let's say you get $230 from the NDIS for an hour of psychology, and your psychologist is $245. You'd have to pay that $15 out of your pocket, because the NDIS won't pay more than its listed rate. Now, what happened in May last year was the NDIS came up with funding periods, also overnight. Got to love that. Now, the reason that we have funding periods is actually quite logical. And we saw this as plan managers. People were spending their funding too quickly, not intentionally. They just didn't realize it. Or perhaps they were engaging with providers who were taking a lion's share of their funding, and they weren't realizing it. So by the time they got to the end of the plan, they didn't have any funding for that type of support left. So now we have these funding periods, and they are listed in your plan for each support that you have in your plan. You can see that for this core funding in my plan, my everyday activities or services, I've got quarterly funding periods. So 3 months, I'm allowed to spend $3,901 in the first 3 months, and then different amounts in the following quarters. The funding period in a plan starts on the first day of my plan, not of the month, not of the year. It starts when my plan starts. So luckily for us, it is really quite nicely illustrated in your plan and in your portal, the NDIS portal, and it tells you how much you can spend in that funding period. And that amount, this is a true example. That amount doesn't have to be the same. Sometimes it's front-loaded because there's an expectation that maybe getting set up with your services might need more time or more funding. And then as you go through the life of your plan, you might need less funding for that type of service. But it will show you there how much you can spend in the funding period. What is very important about funding periods is that that amount is the total amount that you can spend in that period. So in the first 3 months of my plan, I am only allowed to spend $3,901.86. It doesn't matter how many providers I engage. So what does get a little bit tricky is that if you are using more than one provider, you're going to have to add up what you're spending on each of those providers and check that it matches what you have available in that funding period. Now,
so the buy-in on this is okay. So
yes,
being that they doesn't line up to like a standard yearly quarter or a financial year or something of that nature, I think you end up with some misalignment with some of those.
we dropped. You're back? Are you back?
I'm back.
Okay. You said there's a misalignment and then I lost you.
Correct. It seems to be misalignment with financial years and how providers might be able to provide supports because,
Mm,
so some things might go across the financial year, and so that might cause some issues and concerns, which is why doing this math and having a team such as yourself actually adds more value because it gets harder. Can these
it
things roll
does.
over, by the way? Can they roll
Absolutely.
over?
So yeah, so if I don't spend $3,901 in that first quarter, maybe I'm a bit slow. Maybe I haven't started looking for providers. I haven't had a chance to get set up and I don't spend the money in the first quarter. You don't need to worry about that. That rolls over into the next quarter. So whatever you don't spend in that funding period will roll over into the next funding period. Now, this will continue through the life of your plan, but when you get to the end of the plan, you don't get to keep it in the next plan. So don't stockpile because by the time you get to the end of the plan, when it's gone, when that plan ends, that funding is gone. Um, the flip side of that, Dwayne, is if you spend more than the amount in that funding period, you're going to be in trouble because there's lots of confusion about this in the NDIS, but the rule is that that is your total amount. If you spend more, they're not going to steal it from the next funding period and pay it backwards. And that seems logical because you're going to end up with no funds at the end. If you keep stealing from the next period or rolling backwards, you're going to end up with no funding. So the official rule from the NDIS is that we're not allowed to pay more than the total amount in your funding period. Now, here's another example. This one is support coordination. And this is one of your capacity building services. You'll see a total funding amount. You'll see that this one says the funding component is plan managed. So I can use registered and unregistered providers happily. And there are my amounts front loaded for setup, perhaps, and then smaller amounts. And look at the funding period for this one, 6 months. Now, there's nothing consistent about the NDIS. I've seen the same supports funded for support coordination in monthly amounts.
So there is one thing that's consistent about the NDS.
Yes?
Said nothing's consistent about the NDS.
You're right. Nothing. That's the only consistent thing is that nothing is consistent. Absolutely. Again, looking at this example, you see at the bottom it says this funding component is stated. So you cannot use this funding for anything else. If you don't spend it on support coordination or recovery coach, you can't just go and spend it on therapy because you ran out of therapy funding. Another different one, finding and keeping a job. And it's interesting in the three examples we've looked at, which are all real life examples, they have front loaded the first 3 months. Now, I think also that is a change that I'm seeing in the NDIS. Some of the earlier plans when funding periods were created, we didn't see front loading. We just saw an even split and people were upset about that. There is a lot of argument around the fact that disability needs are not consistent. They just don't nicely divide themselves across funding periods for us. So that can be tricky. And look, if you're finding that your funding doesn't meet your needs and it's really clashing, the available funding in a funding period is completely misaligning with your needs, you do need to go back to the NDIS and speak to them.
And the good thing that's front loaded is that because it rolls over, it means that it assumes that it rolls over into the rest of the year. So if you're unable to manage it, but you're right about what you just said, make sure you use it before the year ends.
Mm. And finally, a really good example here because therapy, I told you that 99.95% of people have therapy funding in their plan. So this is an example for surely everybody that's here tonight. One of the rules that came out a few months ago, it feels like a few months, probably a year, was that if a therapy is stated in a plan, as a plan manager, we can only pay for that therapy. Now, it didn't used to be like that. You could kind of spend your therapy funding on whatever you liked. Sometimes it had a guide, sometimes it didn't. It was very sort of inconsistent. Funny that. But now we have very clear rules as a plan manager. And I'm telling you about plan management payment rules. We just have to listen to the NDIS. We don't make any of these rules ourselves, I can assure you. And these two examples here is showing you this very, very interesting bit in the improved
Actually, I'm
daily
gonna I'm
living.
gonna vibe straight on that thing that you just stated. It's you don't make up the rules. You literally share what the rules are from the NDIS. I've seen multiple plan manager letters that they are just deciding as they see fit as opposed to enforcing the spaces. So that's a good point that you raised
It's
right there.
because they don't have the knowledge, Dwayne. They
That's right.
don't have the knowledge, and it's easier to just say no,
Yeah.
or to have a standard decision because they don't necessarily understand the nuances in a plan. And this is a perfect example. On the left hand side, both of these supports are stated. On the left hand side, we don't even have a description, it just says stated. On the right hand side, I've got this description here, and this is what we see all the time here: improve daily living skills. And then it's got this blurb. And the blurb always starts the same: assessment, training, or therapy, blah, 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 blah. But sometimes it actually has a kind of insert, and you can see it's like ill spaced, this little insert here, and it names specific therapies.
Yeah.
So this person has 11, nearly $12,000 worth of therapy in their plan. They can only use it for speech, OT, and psychology. Let's say they needed a physiotherapist more than they actually needed an occupational therapist. As a plan manager, I couldn't pay a physiotherapist from this plan because this plan has it stated. Now, many plans doesn't have that statement in it. So it just has this bland paragraph description and it doesn't name any therapies. So, that's something to look out for in your own plans if
Correct.
if the
So
therapy is stated.
the way we've utilized the stated things before is that if this is something that is absolutely vital to you, and the type of, like, sometimes there's a lot of resistance on certain things, if it's within your plan as a stated thing, it's the service that you're absolutely getting. So we've had Minds of Play as a stated support for people, and that's because that's what they have as that money is for that, as opposed to some other element of these things. But you're right. If it is not flexible, but if you want that to be something that locks into your plan, that's one way of managing it.
Mm. And my last example here is something you might have seen in your plan and gone, I have no idea what that is. This is actually your plan management fees. So, choice and control is the category that is plan management services. And it is a stated support. You can't use it for anything else. So, if you are changing to plan management or you do have plan management in your plan, it doesn't cost you any more or any less. You're not losing any money because you've got a plan manager and you can't use that money for anything else. So those were my plan examples. And, Jack's been answering questions as we're going. And I want to move into kind of an open Q&A. But the last question I had for you, Dwayne, was what tips do you have for people around making sure that you don't over or underspend? Now, your own plan sounds pretty straightforward because you have, those few things you're going to get all the time. But if you think of your daughter's plan and you're using different providers for the same services, or how do you keep track of that and make sure that you don't overspend, because then you're actually going to be out of pocket, but also that you don't underspend, so that you're utilizing that funding.
Correct. Okay. So it's really simple as self-managed. So first thing you do is that you look at the total money you have and look at the total number of days, and then you figure out how much you're to spend. So you've done that part. Cool. You've done that process. Then you figure out exactly which service provider you're going to use, and then you're going to put that down and tell them and figure out those billings, and then kind of know how frequently you're going to utilize them. And so you've done that on page 2. And then page 3 is then making sure that you kind of do that on a regular basis and structure your life well enough to achieve that outcome. And then after that, you actually have the services occur, and then you make sure you pay them. So the way I do that is that I basically take one folder with everything that's called NDIS, and I collect all the bills for the month, and I sit there in front of this thing, and which is what I did today. Thank you very much. Thank you for making me work with the
Do your
NDIS system,
payments.
and literally just put everything in, and then make sure everybody gets paid. And so because I'm self-managed, I either pay them directly ahead of at the time they're supposed to, or depending on the size of the invoice, I whatever, right? Takes a lot of structure and routine. It's like once a month you have to manage that if you can manage that and get those organized that way as self-managed. And that's assuming everything is going hunky-dory.
But
How do
but Dwayne,
but
it's not just self-managed because
no,
you're going to be doing the same if you're plan managed because you're making spending decisions yourself first.
right,
So,
right,
that advice you just gave us is the same no matter how your plan is managed. Take the
yeah,
total amount, divide it by the length of your plan, or look at your funding periods. Even
yeah,
easier, you've got funding periods. So look at the
sure,
funding period, look at the services that you're wanting to use. And, if your therapy is $193 an hour and you've
yeah,
got $3,901, you're going to go, okay, 3,901 divided by 193. Okay, that's how many hours I've got. But
correct,
the trick is to remember that you might have more than one provider you're using in that category of funding. So just make sure
correct.
you add it up.
Yeah, and so that's the hard part about this type of process, and not everyone is staying to the NDIS rate. Some people are significantly more based on whatever their situation is, and some people are in their own little like world, right? So, like this is the part that am I underspending or managing my pace right? Good question.
Mm,
And then when they roll over the plan, did they have the conversation with you and they shrink your budget a little bit? That's when it gets interesting, right?
mm.
Uh,
So look, we've covered a lot, and I'd like to think that we've really looked at this from a practical, boots on the ground perspective. And the technical pieces, I've spoken about core capacity building, capital, recurring, which you're most likely not going to worry about, your therapy that's in your capacity building, looking at funding periods and spending, and all of these things that I've spoken about myself. You will have links to our resources that explain and break it down so that you can actually kind of bookmark it on your computer, have a look, and then when you think, oh my goodness, I can't remember how that worked, you can go back and look at it. But the experience and the practicality that Dwayne is giving you is the bit that I can't share that with you. I don't have an NDIS plan myself, although I speak to thousands of people that do. That sort of real NDIS expert participant is here with us. So before we move into some questions, if anyone has specific questions that haven't been answered, Dwayne's mentioned Minds at Play a couple of times, and I would love you to tell us about Minds at Play and what it does and how you got there.
so while suffering through my first NDIS plan and finding myself having to learn every bit of legislation thing, I found this term called innovative community participation. And then I looked at that term and what it was trying to achieve. And I spoke to my business partner, Dan, and like, Dan, does this sound like Dungeons and Dragons to you? Because it sounds like Dungeons and Dragons to me. And he's like, you're not wrong. With that, we created a company. It just happened to be in the middle of a pandemic, and everybody lost their social groups in person. And we identified how to do social at a distance, which was utilizing
Mm,
Zoom and maintaining a community. And it grew. It went from 4 participants to 84 in the first year. We're currently over 600 participants with 50 staff nationwide, and we are social community participation build 30% below the NDIS hourly rate, and we support at scale. And we haven't had a cancel session since we've started in 2000, right? So the value of what we're doing over here is that we're teaching people the skill sets of social community participation in a safe space, and then we expect them to leave us because we're doing it in a place where they can learn and the language is good. And we're able to teach them how to be a good participant in these types of groups, and then say, I don't have anything more for you other than this one group. Where else are you going to find these things? Have you heard of a local game shop? Have you heard of the library? Do they have and that's what we're seeing. We're seeing people going and starting their own little groups and libraries. Their parents are going, "Wow, my kid used to be nonverbal, and now I can't shut them up." It's brilliant. It's like it's because the learning is not direct in
Easy.
your face. It's not in your face. We're not talking about learning. We're talking about a game. Come play this game with us. Oh, you want? Okay, cool. They're learning all the skills they need to go and continue making friends in the community. And so that becomes the fun part about what we do. We are
And that's capacity building, right?
that
Building
might be
confidence,
that's capacity
building
building, but we
social
sit
skills.
mainly in core. It's the simplest place to be. It's maintaining community. And community is also online because that's the thing
Mm,
that the
yes, it
gaps in
is.
how they work their process is that they don't expressively say online, but you don't ban a whole bunch of 16-year-olds from online and not call that community, right? So this is the balancing act about what it is. Our community is online as well as in person. And this is the skill sets we are building and maintaining and providing safety for them to achieve. And this is the part that it's, it's amazing.
And who doesn't love Dungeons and Dragons,
Yeah.
right?
We've expanded our programs to so much more miniature
Oh my
painting and
goodness.
Stardew Valley.
Minecraft.
Minecraft is obviously a big one for people, and
Yeah.
it's all about how you work together. It's people play Minecraft very kind of by themselves, but with us, they have to work with a team of four to build a space up. You know what four people working together to build a space up is? It's a project manager in the state government. And so those are the skill sets that are I'm going to negotiate with you to figure out where we put the fish pond or the roller coaster. And those things at done at the right age is it's educational. It's life changing. Working together.
And the reason, another reason why I wanted you with me tonight is that you've had this experience that spans from your own experience, your family's experience, and then even your experience as a provider, because you're dealing with families every day, and you're seeing their struggles or where they battling with parts of their funding or understanding their plans and using their plans. So
Right.
you've seen that wide range. So the questions that I have a few questions here, and all of great questions. One of them was about therapy, and I spoke earlier about if you don't see your therapy listed in your plan, what can you spend that funding on? Well, as long as it is a therapy that will help you achieve your goals, it means you have that flexibility. So an example might be we had a family who had a 10-year-old boy and he wanted to be able to ride a bike with the rest of his family. So the therapy funding that he had in his plan could be split between a physiotherapist and an OT, because together one would work on core, one would work on coordination.
Right.
So they could choose between those therapies. And sometimes that choice is actually based on availability of that therapist at the time. However, if it does have the stated therapy, as I said, then that's your therapy. And one of the little tricky things with that, I was talking to the plan managers about where are people having trouble on plan rollovers. Don't assume because it was in your last plan, they put it in your next plan. I think you probably might want to assume that, but that's where people get stuck. And we have seen
The
that
term
happen
rollover
before.
would assume that too, which is that things you roll off doing the rollover sometimes.
Yeah, so I don't know if anyone has specific questions for us, but a lot of them have been answered. There was a great one there about
So
goals.
I'll add an element about some of these things that you're looking to identify. Your providers will actually have like an overview document about how things fit into certain areas. And so this is where like Plan Hero and like ourselves, we have a long chat about where does our program sit inside these things. Because again, these are complex processes, and all you want to do is I need to utilize it to improve it. Does it hit those core goals? And you want to connect those dots. Your provider, if they're in this space and they know what they're doing, will actually help you connect those dots a bit more as well. In addition to the plan, into plan managers, the ones that know what
That's
they're
a
doing.
good point, because providers generally know what line items or what categories of funding can be used for their service. Good providers.
Good providers.
So ask your provider, where does your service fall? What line item are you using to bill? And then straight away, you can look at your plan, you can ask your plan manager, can I spend on this line item? They'll give you a really clear answer. There was a really super question here about having a support worker that is a family member. Absolutely not. NDIS says no. They might give you specific written permission if there are extreme circumstances where the only people that can support you or somebody else is a family member, but otherwise they cannot be a family member, but they can be somebody casual. So I remember one mum who had a 15-year-old autistic son, and there was this gap between him getting home and her getting home from work. And so they were able to engage their neighbor as a support worker to spend those 2 hours with their son at home so that he wasn't alone and they could feed him and keep him occupied while the mum was still at work. Now, that's perfectly fine as long as that support worker or individual has an ABN. Then you can use somebody casually. You don't necessarily have to go through a company.
I think I saw an open question that is quite hilarious.
Go.
Savannah Brown, thanks. If you can't be enthusiastic about like helping people, like why would you be helping people, right? So this is the balancing act about this. I'm lucky that I get to I don't just do this. My day job is a manager HR projects in state government. So my day job is focusing on helping disability inclusion and diversity in state government. Basically my tagline is I do disability inclusion. It just looks differently in different areas. And so this is fun. As complicated and harder it is, it's still fun for me. And so this is the part, and lots of people who are in this industry, they're here because they care, and that's why they do this. This is why you're up at like 9:45 p.m.
Yeah.
on a Tuesday. This is outside hours. Why are you here?
Yeah. And look, it gets, I know I said it gets easier, and then Dwayne laughed at me, but the more knowledge that you gain, you're going to get a better handle on it. One other great question was, I said rent is on the support list of items you cannot spend your funding on, but that is not the same as SIL, which is supported independent living. That is specific funding to support you independently. It might be at home or it might be in disability specific accommodation, but that's not the same as rent. So you might have funding for that.
Yeah, so online with that, almost everything in that support list that is a no, depending on a specific situation, is actually also a yes. I'm sorry, I'm saying that's giving away, but every person that initially thought that their answer was a no was actually they were still able to keep operating. And that's because they're yes under a specific format. And this is the part about the NDIS that's confusing. It didn't add the value they thought it would add. It's just niche in certain areas for certain people.
And we started by saying that the NDIS is confusing for everybody. And Dwayne's even admitting here that when those support lists came out, he was confused. I was confused. We looked at those lists thinking, okay, how does this work now? And we still have those moments, but the NDIS is an incredible scheme. There is no other scheme like it in the world.
Absolutely.
And, we've come a long way. In 9, 10 years, 13 years officially, we've come a long way. I remember when we started 9 years ago, there was no line item for occupational therapy, didn't exist. There was no music therapy. There was nothing in that realm. And there certainly was very little around autism supports. And today, the difference is enormous. So, we're learning, we're going to face radical changes in the NDIS because of the cost blowouts that have happened. That's just a battle that the NDIS is going to have to have, and everyone's going to feel some pain, some more than others. But at the end of the day, we want the scheme to be around for everybody. So my final advice would be to consider plan management or a good plan manager that will help you, will guide you, will answer those questions and make you feel safe. And Dwayne, your final word on one piece of advice, right? For someone that just got a plan, and for someone who has had a plan already and still finds it confusing and overwhelming. What is your final piece of advice?
Find community, and that community is people like you, people who care about you, and people who want to make sure you grow. The NDIS is a community. It You just need to find the right people to support your focus area, and they're here.
Lots of them. 790 something thousand of them.
Yeah. Well, how many people in your organization?
Oh, that organization. I thought you meant the whole of the NDIS participants. Oh,
Uh,
yes, they're here. Plan
so
Hero is certainly here.
I'd say
Mine's at play.
some plan managers are great for different disabilities. They might be suitable for certain things. They may not understand the whole spectrum. This is one that understands yours, and they work on enough of the community to get there. So
Thank you. Appreciate that. Have a wonderful evening, everyone. And thank you for joining us. And you'll get those recordings with links to those specific technical, easy to understand resources that will really break down some of those funding groups that I've spoken about tonight. And thank you, Dwayne. You're going to be a hard act to follow for my next one.
all I'm going to say is that you've got to add specifical to your brochures going forward now.
Okay, we'll do. All right, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Bye
Take
bye.
care.